Hi, welcome to today's episode. My name is Tom Rolley for System.io.dev. Interesting experience. So this morning I woke up and my internet was down. No particular reason, can't tell what happened, but sometime in the nighttime, the connection out to the tower, somewhere out in the distance, just dropped out. Not really sure why it happened or what happened, but the implications was that there was about 6 to 8 hours of no internet to my house. Now, this might not sound like such a big deal, and particularly through it was nighttime, you're like, dude, what were you doing? But I have a Ethereum mining rig, and obviously crypto's gone bananas and everyone's talking crypto, but these rigs, if you're not familiar with them, I get that many of you are, but if you're not, they need to be connected to the internet. So the internet drops out and suddenly it can't take the data in and out, and it continues to run, but with no data. It's not smart enough to say, actually, let's go in a low power mode while there's no internet. It just keeps running at full speed. So it's burning up electricity. Look, it's not that big a deal compared to the price of Ethereum, but it does keep running at that thing and nothing is being generated. Basically, I've got an idle worker, an idle Ethereum mining rig. Now, for whatever reason, I did call the internet guys. I was like, hey, can you fix this? They haven't called back, but the internet did come back on. I jiggled with some cords. I don't know what happened, whether a cord got loose or whether they fixed something out there in the tower. Anyway, the thing comes back on and it's back working again. Now you might think, well, how is this applicable to business? I mean, seriously, a 24/7 Ethereum mining rig versus running a business. I mean, one is pretty much set and forget as long as the price of Ether is higher than the cost of electricity and the repayments on the actual hardware, I'm ahead. But what I want you to consider is that you have a bunch of workers in your team. And they're hopefully doing the work of the business. But every time the equivalent of the internet going out happens, you now have an idle worker. And the thing about cost of electricity, it probably cost me like $1 or $2 maximum, like let's call it $2. Cost me $2 to run that. But if your team is out of action for 2 hours and they're on $30 an hour, then that's a $60 cost that you didn't get paid for at all. And sure, they might, when they do their work, it's like, well, they do $200 an hour work. Like when they work, I'm making $200 an hour. But two things. Number one, your assumption is that they're working an 8-hour day. That may not be happening at all. Because every time they get stuck and they have to come to you and ask what to do, they're now an idle worker. Their internet connection metaphorically has dropped away and your electricity costs continue. And until you can get to that worker and sort out that problem, they're going to remain idle. Now, they might not be idle in their minds. They are perhaps going to do their banking or buy something on Amazon or check the news or get a coffee or talk to a coworker. All of that stuff goes on, but essentially they're not earning you $200 an hour. And remember that your upfront cost, that $200 an hour, you also have to take all of your fixed costs out of that. So they might only be making, let's call it $100 an hour. So if they work 3 hours, they make 300, and they don't work for 5, then that costs you 150. You haven't actually made even $150 because you've got your fixed costs. You might be breaking even, and suddenly your profitability and your capacity to pay payroll and even your sanity, because you're having to sort out all these problems. And if once you're aware of this, you're like, oh my God, this is costing me a fortune in order to actually run this thing. How do I get these people working again? So your thought is, right, I'm going to solve their problem. Let me solve this problem. Let me solve this problem. But what I want you to think about is a change in your mindset, that there is a difference between solving the problem that they're coming to you with and going to the actual reason or the cause why that happened. What are you going to fix? You can invest maybe the same amount of time. Perhaps it takes more time to go to, hey, whatever caused this. But once it's done, it's fixed. It's not going to show up again. it doesn't show up in 3 days or 7 days for you to deal with again and again and again. Rather, you're like, okay, let me sort this out once and for all. This is where your systems and processes come into play. You could at least actually go to the system documentation and say, hey, well, how did this happen? You're like, well, I went to this step, and this step, and I followed this, and then that happened. You're like, okay, great, well, let's fix that. And if you're even empowering your team, you're like, well, how do you want to fix this? And they might learn to fix their own work, which would be really awesome, because now not only are you freed from sorting out their problems once and for all, you're actually empowering them to sort their problems out for you. So the overall benefit to your business is suddenly you have an asset that is the way that you run your business. If this is something that interests you, if this is something that you recognize, you're like, man, my team, they're driving me insane, and you come to payroll and you wonder what happened. Where did the work go? What actually got done? Then I invite you to head over to the systemio.dev page, pop in your email, put in your name there, go and grab the training. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode tomorrow as we continue this journey into the power of efficiency that comes through having your business systematized. See you then.